key points for today, guys. We need to understand, obviously, what factors influence the growth of plants, which we've gone over already, okay? But we're going to be looking at those in a bit of a different context. Now we're going to be looking at them in terms of how do they influence other things within the plant that can also influence growth, okay? We're going to look at the hormones that are responsible for growth and development in plants. Plants actually do produce hormones, just as your body does. Okay? They're obviously a bit different, but they cause different things to happen in the plant. And then we got to understand the third thing here, which is that plant shape is not fixed. Okay? But it is the result of the interaction of the environment and the plant's growth responses to it. Right? So if I have two identical plants, like they're genetically identical, I grew them from cuttings of the same plant. If I don't grow them in the same environment, they'll grow to look different, even though they're clones essentially of each other. Right? If I make a clone of you, it's going to look exactly like you. Right? If you both grow up in the same house, likelihood that you'll both be pretty much the same is pretty high. If I clone you, and you grow up here, and your clone grows up in an environment where it is constantly manipulated and tortured, it will probably end up being different than you. Okay? Same is true for plants. Right? If plants are a product of their environment, and the argument can be made that so are people, but okay, that's for like a psychology class, not for this. Right? But for plants, they are a product of their environment. If I grow one plant in an environment where it's in constant, direct, intense sunshine, and another one gets, soft, perfect artificial light all the time, they're obviously going to look different. Okay, so that's what we're going to be looking at today. All right, control of plant growth and development. So the problem for plants is they're rooted to one spot. They can't move, they're stuck there. Okay, they have to adapt to whatever the environment throws them. Okay. So the program, the genetic program for their final shape is not pre-programmed. Certainly the program for the shape of their leaves and things like that is. Okay, and so when a maple tree is not suddenly going to start growing pine needles. Okay, things like that are genetically predetermined, but the final shape, number of leaves, whatever of a plant is going to be a product of its environment. Right, so if we're looking at this picture right here, it's kind of hard to see, but this tree right here, the trunk is doing that. Why?
It's followed
What?
the light.
What's that?
It's followed the light.
Well,
Sunlight?
I mean, it could have got just as much light if it had grown like that, right? Yeah, why is it on an angle? All these other trees grew straight up. Nolan? Yeah, this tree is straight to this point, and then it starts to grow kind of back over its roots again. Close. If it was wind, they'd all look like that. Okay? The answer is that this tree got knocked over when it was about this tall. Okay, maybe there was an avalanche or a rock slide or something like that and knocked it over. Okay, and you can see that around it are smaller, like deciduous plants that tend to grow after a disturbance, whereas over here, these trees are tall and straight up and down. They obviously weren't affected by the rock slide. This one was. It survived the rock slide, but it got knocked over. Now, it could have kept growing out this way. It would have got just as much light. Probably would have done okay that way. But if it kept growing out like that, what would eventually happen to it? It would fall over. It would uproot itself because it would have all this weight out away from its root system. Okay? So plants actually have a sense of up and down, right? And that's useful to them when they're very small and maybe being shaded by taller plants. They don't necessarily know exactly where the light is, but light is generally located in which direction? Up. So gravity tells them which way is up. Okay? And they'll grow in response to gravity until they get a cue from the light telling them, okay, light's over here. Okay? Now, which one would they go to as their primary? Light or gravity? Light. Yeah, they're always going to grow towards light. If I got a tree and I'm growing it in the forest and a tree falls down somewhere and a beam of light just manages to come in and hit the tree on one side, it's going to grow that way. Okay? It's not going to keep growing straight up when it's got light over there. It's going to grow towards the light. That's its primary thing. Okay? But secondary to light would be geotropism, which is growth response to gravity. It's just growing upwards to try to get the light instead. All right. So as we were saying, the final shape of plants is going to vary a lot more than animals. Okay. I mean, we all know that, you know, barring anything going on in our lives, we're going to, as a final adult product, have 2 hands, 2 feet, 10 fingers, 10 toes, 2 ears, 2 eyes. Okay, all of that stuff is genetically predetermined, right? But for a plant, that's not the case. All right, what is that plant growing in response to? Light. Obviously, the light source is off to its left. It's orienting all of its growth, all of its leaves to the left. Right? It's obviously not lying on its side and gravity pulling it the other way. Okay? It's obviously growing towards light. All plants will do this. They'll grow towards the light. Okay? Back pre-COVID, when we were allowed to have things like dirt in our classroom, I had all kinds of plants in here. Okay? And I would run like torturous experiments on them. So I would put some of them in the window, and I would turn them every time I watered them. Okay? And when I did that, they grew evenly on all sides because I was constantly reorienting them, okay? And then they would have to grow towards the light again because I turned the leaves they'd just grown away from the sun, tormenting them. Okay? So I'd keep making them grow, but they would be very even and very round. And then I had this other plant that sat on top of the filing cabinet, and I never turned it. Where did its leaves grow? Yeah, only on one side. It was this big long thing that actually almost reached to the floor. Okay, and just hung off of the filing cabinet and only ever grew on that one side because they never turned it. Why would it grow towards the wall? There's nothing over there for it. It would only grow towards the window. Okay, if I'd have let it hit the floor, probably would have tried to crawl along the floor. Okay, now that particular plant is also the kind that we use today in the lab. Be mindful, if you ever have that plant, don't let it get near drywall. It puts out these little things that will stick to drywall, okay? And when they stick to the drywall, they'll actually grow anchors that will go into the drywall. Like ivy crawls up a building, these plants will do that to your drywall, okay? And then when you're not expecting it and you just want to pull the plant and move it, you rip out a chunk of drywall. Don't do that. Okay, life lesson. All right, so houseplant on a windowsill is going to grow towards the light. Okay. If you rotate the plant, it will soon reorient its growth until its leaves once again face the window, which is what I was doing with it. Okay. Growth of a shoot towards light is called phototropism. In this case, positive phototropism because it's towards the light. Is it possible for a plant to show negative phototropism? Yeah, it can. If a light source is too intense, a plant will actually grow away from it. Okay, or it will not grow as much towards it as it normally would, in an attempt to kind of shade out other parts of it. Right. There can obviously be too much of a good thing. So in a forest or natural ecosystem where plants may be crowded, phototropism directs growing seedlings towards the sunlight, okay, that powers their photosynthesis, and all of that is controlled by different plant hormones. Okay, we're going to talk about the different plant hormones. So what you're going to be expected to do on your unit exam with the information in this lesson is I would show you a picture of a plant and then explain to you the situation it's in. And then you would have to tell me whether it's showing phototropism, geotropism, which is growth response to gravity, thigmotropism, which is growth response to touch, okay, and how that's being accomplished, talking about what hormones might be involved and how all of that works. Okay, so that's what you could expect here, as well as maybe some multiple choice questions with pictures. Okay, all right. So there's 5 major classes of plant hormones, each concerned with a particular environmental stimulus. Now, where is the light source for these little sprouts? Off to the right. What's up with that one sprout on the left? Okay, so it's way on the other side of the dish. So when it started growing, what were all these other ones doing to it? Right. So what did it grow in response to? It grew in response to gravity. That's why it grew up. Okay, as opposed to bending like all these other ones. Okay, they could at least detect where the light was, but this one was so far over on this side that it didn't get any light, so it grew straight. Okay, now that it's in the light, it'll also probably start to do this, okay, and start growing over in that direction, right? But because it didn't have a primary source, that is phototropism, it used geotropism to grow upwards, which eventually got it into the light anyway, and was probably the shorter route. If you take into account how much these things bend, this has probably had to grow less to get into the light, okay, than all the ones that were bending to get into it. All right, so the first type of plant hormone we're going to talk about is auxins. Okay, so an auxin, okay, is a plant hormone that causes elongation of the plant. That means makes the cells, not the plant itself. The plant itself does get longer as well, but the cells get longer. Okay, so it causes individual cells in the plant to lengthen. That's what auxins will do. Okay. Now, the two pictures there of the river, okay, that's the same place. Okay, so this is the same, these are the same place right here. They're a few weeks apart. What's happened to all the plants? They're all gone. Yeah, they've all died. Not deforestation either, okay? It wasn't a result of logging. These two pictures were taken in 1968 in a little corner of Southeast Asia. What was going on in Southeast Asia in 19? The Vietnam War was going on. Okay? Now, in the Vietnam War, the Americans had this really big problem. They were losing. Okay? And the Vietnamese soldiers had this like huge interconnected system of tunnels, and they would ambush them, and it was bad. Okay, so there were lots of places to hide, essentially, in the jungle. And the Americans said, well, we're tired of them having places to hide. We need to get rid of the forest. Okay, now, the ideas that came out were tactical nuclear strike. Okay, well, that kind of takes care of everything, but there's also all that, like, you know, unnecessary death and destruction. So that one was out. Okay, and then the next idea was carpet bombing. Same problem. Okay, basically means you fly a whole bunch of bombers side by side in a big long line, and you bomb absolutely everything. Which in the end has the same result as a tactical nuclear strike, but it takes way more resources. Okay. Third idea: burn it. Okay. What's the problem with trying to set a tropical rainforest on fire? It's tropical. It's very wet. They don't burn well. Okay. It's not like a forest fire here where it can rage out of control. In the tropical rainforest, it's very, very wet. Getting an entire forest to burn is a bit of a problem. So they said, we need to find a way to get rid of the forest. CIA figure it out. CIA is like, sweet, we like a challenge. Okay, so they came up with this idea. And it was that if you give something too much of what it needs, it can be bad for it. Okay, so what they did is they created a synthetic auxin that could be sprayed from helicopters onto the forest. This synthetic auxin would land on the leaves of the plants and be absorbed through the stomates as kind of a vapor. And then it would cause massive, uncontrolled cell growth. The plant would grow itself to death. Okay? Anyone know what this chemical was called? Agent Orange. Okay? The CIA called this stuff Agent Orange because what did it do to the forest? Made it orange because it killed it all. Okay? Now, they sprayed this stuff on like really heavy because, you know, more is better. Okay? We actually still use this chemical. We call it weed and feed. Okay? It's 2,4-D. It's the stuff they spray dandelions with. It doesn't kill grass because grass doesn't have broad leaves. It only affects broad-leaved plants. So you don't want to get it on trees or other things. Okay, but if you spray it on your grass, it'll just kill the dandelions. Okay, and you guys have probably all seen what dandelions look like after they get sprayed with this stuff, right? They grow really long and coily, and then they just die. Okay, well, the same thing happened to the forest. Okay, in fact, they even sprayed on the helicopters a picture of Smokey the Bear. And instead of saying only you can prevent forest fires, they just took the fires part out. Only you can prevent forest. You know, these people are different. Okay? But it worked. It was a synthetic auxin, and it made these plants grow themselves to death. Okay? It was essentially like putting the forest on steroids. Okay? Because the same thing can happen to people, right? If you start using anabolic steroids, okay, human growth hormone, testosterone, okay, any of those kinds of things, okay, it certainly has beneficial effects in that it builds the muscle you were probably looking for, but the problem with getting too much of something is you've got lots of it in your system, you're growing really fast, your liver has to clean all the toxins from the breakdown of those hormones out. It's way more than there should be. Okay? And then there's the other added problems. Go ahead, question.
Oh, I was just wondering how long you
Couple weeks. Yeah. Okay? So the added problems with having too much hormone is that the places in the body where the hormone is produced normally stop producing it, because they always detect these huge amounts of it, so they're like, well, we don't need to make any, there's plenty here already, okay? And if you don't use it, you lose it. Okay? Think about what glands in the human body might produce testosterone. They shrink. Yeah. So, you have all these nice big muscles, but, okay? Yeah. Forget about having kids or anything like that later. Okay? Yeah, it's kind of bad that way. And the same thing is true for anything that uses hormones as a growth stimulating chemical. If you have too much of it, it will overdo itself. Okay? And it'll be too much. All right. The other things that 2,4-D they noticed could also do, okay, is it actually reduced root growth. Okay, so this is your wild type or normal version of this plant. When sprayed with really small amounts of 2,4-D, it would grow a lot on the top, wouldn't kill it, but just enough to make it like really grow, but it would hardly grow any roots. Okay, normal ones have lots of roots and much less growth above ground. Okay, so they just can't support the type of growth that this spray would induce. All right. The other thing it can do is in really, really dilute concentrations, it can trick a flower into thinking it's been pollinated. Okay, so normally, we talked about this last week, the pollination process is, the pollen lands on there, there's sperm in the pollen, they fertilize the egg, and you get your seeds wrapped in fruit. Well, this stuff, if sprayed in really dilute amounts on the flower, can trick the flower into thinking it's been pollinated. It'll make fruit without seeds. Seedless fruit. Okay? Now, you have to spray it with this 2,4-D stuff, which, oh, by the way, I didn't mention, it's a carcinogen. Means it causes, yeah, it's not good for you. Okay? So yeah, just think about that. Okay? It's really not good for you. They had all kinds of veterans of the Vietnam War that had all kinds of cancers and stuff, especially lung cancer from inhaling the fumes of this stuff. Because they said, well, it only kills trees, so they told them to put on their rain ponchos and they sprayed it on them. Okay, like they were down there doing whatever and they sprayed them. Okay, so yeah, not good stuff. Okay, but we do have a use for it now. That's obviously we don't use it in the same concentration, but this is also why they put signs everywhere. Okay, when they've sprayed it, they say this place was recently treated with weed killer. Do not play here. Okay, we always have those little cards. Okay. All right, questions on auxins. So auxins make the plant cells get longer. Okay, they don't make more cells, they make each individual cell get longer. All right, cytokinins are another plant hormone, and cytokinins cause cytokinesis, or cell division. So this hormone makes more cells. And that's important if you're needing to replace old, diseased, damaged, whatever cells within the plant. This will allow them to do that. It's also why some plants can live so long. Okay? They can keep producing new cells to replace old or dying cells. Okay. questions on cytokinins? Right, so, I mean, they're important in growth, but the auxins are still our primary growth hormone, making all the cells get longer. Okay? All right, gibberellins do a little bit of both. Okay? Gibberellins are kind of a general purpose hormone. Okay? You mostly see them in the roots and in young leaves. Okay? And they stimulate growth in both leaves and the stem. Okay? But they have little effect on root growth. Okay? So they make the stem, they stimulate mostly growth in the stem to make the stem get longer. But they don't stimulate secondary growth. So in a plant, there's primary growth that makes it get taller, and then there's secondary growth that increases its girth and allows for the support of all that other vertical growth. Okay? Gibberellins only cause primary growth upwards, not secondary growth to support it. Right? So if you get too much gibberellins, you can get a plant that'll grow really tall, not be able to support itself, and then fall over. Okay? And that happens in Asia, in lots of rice paddies. There's a fungus that can grow in some of the rice paddies, and it causes what they call foolish seedling disease. Okay? And the fungus gets on the roots, and it causes an overproduction of gibberellins. The rice grows tall, but doesn't grow thick, and it falls over. Okay? Foolish seedlings, they grow too fast. Okay? It can also stimulate the growth of more blossoms. Okay? And if you get more blossoms, you get more fruit, but not bigger fruit, smaller fruit. Okay? So you'll get more seeds, but you won't get lots of big fruit. Okay?
Is there ever a time where you would want to be like a smaller, like wide plant, or over like a tall one?
Yeah, I mean, depends on your environmental conditions. Yeah, I mean,
Guess
if
like-
strong winds or something like that,
Yeah.
low to the ground would be better.
Yeah, because there's like the Arctic moss, because like that's not really trying to grow anywhere.
Well, and it's a moss, it's not a vascular
Okay,
plant, so
okay.
it can't grow tall because it doesn't have the tubes.
Okay, that makes sense, yeah.
All right, so in stems, like we said, gibberellins are they kind of do everything. They stimulate elongation and division, so they kind of do both jobs of the cytokinins and the auxins. But mostly affect the stem as opposed to anywhere else. Okay, and there's been a lot of kind of genetic modification involving gibberellins, right? So if you look here, this picture here is showing two different versions of the same species of rice. So there's the tall, kind of wild type of the rice. It grows taller, but it doesn't produce as much rice because it spends energy growing tall. Okay, so they've kind of genetically modified it. And when I say that, I don't mean like in a lab they take chromosomes out. They just breed it. Okay, you can breed plants. Okay, you just make sure one's pollinate. And it produces a semi-dwarf version, okay, which is shorter but higher yielding. So it doesn't grow as tall but makes more rice, which is more economically viable, okay, than taller rice that doesn't produce as much rice. All right, abscisic acid is the next one. This one's an important hormone here in Canada because it's the hormone that tells plants it's time to go dormant, right? So its release is stimulated by shortening day length. Okay, so it actually slows down the growth of a plant and causes it to assume a more dormant state. Okay, now it does this, and you might want to add this to your notes. Okay, it causes it to assume the dormant state by disrupting chlorophyll production. Okay, so abscisic acid is an acid that disrupts the process by which cells are able to make chlorophyll. Okay? When chlorophyll isn't made, then photosynthesis stops, transport of water to the leaves stops, and essentially then the leaves dry up, fall off, the plant dries out. Okay, so there's no water trapped in the stem when it's going to reach freezing temperatures, okay, and that's exactly what a plant wants in preparation for winter. Right. So what you see here in this picture is varying degrees of abscisic acid being applied to these like lilies. Right? So in the back, these lilies haven't had anything done to them. So they've grown fully mature, they're flowered, okay, and they're doing just fine. Right? The plants in the next row have had some abscisic acid, okay, produced, and as a result, they did not reach maturity. Okay? Their growth was a lot slower, okay, over the same amount of time. And these plants here hardly grew at all because they had even more abscisic acid, and so their growth was slowed even more. Okay? All right, questions on abscisic acid? All right. Oh, sorry.
So why would they use that? Like, it says for like trout and stuff. So like, why would they even like
So
kind of kill
a
off?
desert plant would do this during the dry season. So they would their stimulus might be actually lengthening day. Okay, so as days are getting longer, a desert plant might prepare for dormancy using abscisic acid. It's still going to cut off.
And so then like later it would like allow it to regrow, kind of thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a seasonal trigger. Whatever it is, lengthening day or shortening day, it's day length. Okay, for most places it's shortening day, right? Because plants that grow in the desert typically grow most of the time, but they slow during the hot part. But some plants do go completely dormant. All right, ethylene is the next one. Now, ethylene is actually a gas that gets released by the sepals. Those are the little leaves that are sometimes still attached to the top of a fruit. Okay, so like they're just on the stem of an apple, or they're the ones that are kind of on the top of a tomato. Okay, things like that. Those small leaves that were essentially the base of the flower. Right, they're still left, and they produce this gas called ethylene. And the presence of ethylene gas causes fruit to ripen. Okay, causes all plant parts to essentially ripen. Bananas produce more ethylene than any other fruit. All right, which is why we have the banana principle. Okay, the banana principle goes like this. If you buy bananas when they're yellow, they'll be brown before you eat them. If you buy bananas green, you'll eat them before they're ready. It's true. Okay? Bananas produce a lot of ethylene, so they ripen quickly. It's why you don't want to put them around anything else. If you put them around other fruit or other vegetables, they will cause them to spoil faster. Okay? Here in Canada, if we grow tomatoes, they typically have to be ripened indoors because we get such a short growing season. If you leave them out, they'll get frosted. So people harvest them and they're still green. They put them in their windowsill or they put them in a box. Okay? Why does putting them in a box cause them to ripen faster? Yeah, the gas gets trapped. The ethylene gas gets trapped. In fact, if you want to ripen even faster, you throw a couple of apples in with the tomatoes. Apples also produce a lot of ethylene gas, okay, and they'll cause the tomatoes to ripen more quickly. Okay, but yeah, ethylene is this gas that gets produced by all essentially ripening fruit, okay, and it causes the aging process to occur faster, okay, and it also usually triggers like the either death or dormancy of a plant. Death if it's an annual, that is only grows for 1 year. Dormancy, it'll cause the secretion of abscisic acid, which will cause it to go dormant. If it's a perennial, that is, grows back every year. All right? They actually had, and I think you can still get them somewhere, but for a while they were advertising these green bags that you could put all your produce in, and they actually trapped ethylene gas. Okay, so there's like good science behind it. If you put these bananas, you could leave them in there for weeks, and the inner lining of the bag would absorb the ethylene gas and keep things fresh for even longer. I'm not sure why you can't buy them anymore. There was probably something toxic about that material. Okay, hey, it worked. Okay, it trapped the ethylene gas. Okay, and as a result, things didn't ripen quickly and they didn't spoil, so you could keep stuff in your fridge, okay, for a lot longer. Okay, so that's all the hormones. Okay, now we're going to look at how some of those hormones cause growth patterns or tropisms in plants. And we've talked about the three kinds of tropisms. Now we're going to look at how they all happen, because they all happen in the same way. What causes them is different, but what they do to cause this curving or growing in a certain direction is the same for all of them. Okay, so tropisms are growth responses that result in curvatures of whole plant organs toward or away from stimuli. Okay? If it's phototropism, it's generally towards the light. Geotropism is away from gravity. Okay? And thigmotropism can be either. That's the growth response to touch. So sometimes it grows towards the touch, and sometimes it's like leave me alone and grows away from it.
So if you grow a plant like this on the side and it starts bending up towards the sun,
Yeah.
and then as soon as it does this, you flip the pot upright, then would it stop growing to the side and then start growing straight up, or would it go to the side then up after?
It'll keep, if you keep moving it, it'll keep responding. And this is actually not towards the light. This is because of gravity. Because if it grew out to the side here, it'd still get light,
Okay.
right? Light's the primary. But it's not going to want to grow out to the side because it'll eventually fall over.
Yeah.
It wants to grow upright.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, so the mechanism, sorry.
Well, just kind of adding to the gravity thing. So like how we can differentiate if it's like the main source is gravity or light is like there's like just a change in shape kind of thing.
Change in the shape, and if it's in a question that I've given you, it'll be in my description. So there'll be a picture, and then there'll be an explanation of what's happened.
Okay.
So if I say something like, the plant was knocked over, the amount of light it received did not change, then it's definitely not phototropism, right? Because it could have just kept growing and been fine light-wise, but it started balancing itself. And maybe I even use the term balance, or grows back over its roots or something like that that would imply it's not light. Okay, so the mechanism by which all three tropisms happen, okay, and this part's important as well, so this whole slide is important. Okay, the mechanism for tropisms is a differential rate of growth of cells on opposite sides of the organ. So what we mean by that is one side of the plant grows faster than the other side. So what's happening here is we've got gravity telling it which way is up. And so what the plant does to grow upwards is, on this side, there'll be more of which plant hormone? The cells on that side are going to grow faster as a result of getting longer. Right. We're going to get more auxins on this side. So the cells on this side will grow longer and faster than the ones on the inside. And that's going to cause the plant to bend. Okay, because it's going to produce a bending force. If you've got cells on one side growing faster and longer, they push the plant back upright, or whichever direction it needs to grow. Okay, so this differential rate of growth is caused by more auxins on this side than the other side. There has never been a unit exam where I did not ask for that exact thing to be explained. All right, so geotropism is caused by gravity, and it can be seen in trees that grow on steep hillsides. And actually, I'm gonna give you guys just 2 minutes here. I gotta find a picture that I took this summer that's for thigmotropism. I just thought of it, and I don't think I put it in here. I didn't. Okay, give me 1 minute. So, geotropism, guys, growth response to gravity. Okay, so what we see is plants growing away from the pole of gravity, upwards. Okay, and they do that same way we talked about. They're going to secrete more auxins to one side of the plant than the other, causing that side to grow faster, pushing the plant back to vertical, or even past vertical and back over its roots in an extreme case. Okay. Phototropism, okay, like we said, it's caused by the location of light sources, plants growing towards light. It's causing more auxins to be secreted on the one side, making that side grow faster, bending the plant towards the light. Okay, and we can see that a bit in this picture here. This side here would have extra auxin on it. Okay, this side would have shorter cells because auxins cause lengthening of cells, and that's going to bend the plant, okay, in that other direction. And then lastly, we got thigmotropism, and that's the one where I was trying to get the pictures, but I couldn't get them quickly enough here. Okay, it's stimulated by touch, and so it's a growth response where the plant will usually coil around something. Okay, so if you've got like sweet peas or peas that are growing up a fence, Okay, they put those little vines out and they wrap their tendrils around the fence. Okay, that's exactly the same thing. They're causing auxins on one side to make that vine grow faster, and that causes it to coil around something, okay, that it can use then to support itself. Ivy does the same thing as it grows up the side of a building, right? Same idea there, right? So this one here, this picture here, this would be your normal type. This had a stick in it, but the stick was removed. The plant was using the stick for support. It had grown around the stick, and then they just pulled the stick out to show how much longer this plant would get than the other one. Okay, a plant can support itself, so it can grow taller faster.
Don't tomatoes do that too?
Tomatoes, yes, will do that as well. Lots of plants have some sort of ability to grab onto things to support themselves. Okay. All right, so you got those 5 questions there. They're all pretty straightforward. So give you a minute or two on those. See if I can find those pictures here and get them on here quickly. Okay, so this is one of the pictures. It's the only one I could get up in time here. But okay, you see all these spruce trees? How all of their branches are kind of swept up the hill here? Okay, well that's because the ocean is just over to this side here, okay, and the wind always blows off the ocean onto these trees, and it's caused them to just bend, okay, because of thigmotropism. Okay, I'll show you the other ones tomorrow.